What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to head back into Showdown to talk about a little bit of team building, and we're going to be looking at cores today. So every good team has a strong core, right? A strong core gives a competitive team an identity, right? And often when a team struggles or doesn't do well, right, but with play aside, it's partly the fault of not having that strong core. It might be missing pieces, or it might be using suboptimal ones that don't really let the essence of the squad shine. But once you have that strong core, right, then you can choose supporting pieces depending on what's missing, you know, maybe covering some weaknesses that the core might have, or just patching up certain matchups in general, right? But then how do you even identify a strong core to begin with, right? I always get this question sometimes during coaching sessions, and really the way to see it is just flat out testing, right? You know, just like you can say, okay, these three work well together, whereas maybe these two or three pieces, they're kind of interchangeable, and maybe we need something else, right? And that comes from a lot of testing, right? It's not something that you can just think of right then and there, right? You need to have to test things, right? Whether it be like ladder or some tournament play, either way, you got to test some stuff, right? And then at the same time, you got to look at some tournaments, and then if you see some consistent results from certain teams, then you can kind of mix and match and pair and see like, okay, we had these 4 or 5 tournaments, and from these tournaments, these were the squads that were doing well, right? And a lot of times they'll have like similar archetypes with similar pieces that are doing well, and that's where you identify that strong core, right? Because it's getting that result for a reason, okay? And luckily for you guys, I'm gonna save you a lot of time and a lot of heavy lifting by identifying some of these strong cores based on, you know, what we've seen up until this point in regulationE. So this way you can get a sense of how to start your team building for your format, right? And you know that we have LAIC coming up, and I'm sure a bunch of you guys are going to that, as well as the few of you that we've had coaching for, you know, that have upcoming premier challenges and mid-season challenges. So you can kind of take some of these ideas and build around them, right? So without further ado, let's just go ahead and take a look at our first core here. All right, so one of the cores I want to start things off with is this Roaring Moon idea with Gholdengo, okay? So you have a strong dragon type in the format, right? Roaring Moon. So Dark Dragon, pretty strong, right? You are able to resist a lot of the Ogerpon stuff, and then your Dark type is a good matchup into some of the Psyspam stuff, right? And then Gholdengo, especially with Terra Dragon right now, so like you have a good solid Steel type, you have a Ghost type attack, you know, we're pretty good into Flutter main in that sense. And then, you know, with Terra Dragon, just like the Roaring Moon, you're just able to resist a lot of the Ogerpon stuff, right? And then what you want to do is just to be able to set these two up, right? And part of Roaring Moon's weaknesses is like, you know, not so great physical defense. So if you just add something like the Hisuian-Arcanine, this now becomes your core, this Moon Gholdengo Arcanine core, okay? Because Arcanine now has Intimidate, which now makes Roaring Moon's physical defenses not that bad, right? Because now physical attacks aren't doing as much damage. So I feel like Roaring Moon plus like some good intimidator like Landorus, or in this case Arcanine, is going to be really, really good. So now the question is like, how do I support this Moon Gholdengo Arcanine core? So there's a few things you can consider, right? Now that I have bits and pieces of my VGC cores, I can kind of start rounding out the slots. So if I want to aim for something like a Dragon, Fairy, Steel, Fire, Water, Grass core, it's very simple. You could just aim for stuff like this. You can go for like Wellspring, Ogerpon right away, and now you have this Fire, Water, Grass core with these two, Arcanine and the Ogerpon Wellspring. And then you could have something like Iron Hands, right? Because you want Fake Out on your team, okay? So, you know, you're just checking off boxes in your checklist for your team building. Like, do I have Intimidate? Do I have Fake Out? Do I have Redirection? Ogerpon here can give you all these things along with Iron Hands, right? Because again, Iron Hands does have Fake Out. It's one of the best ones in the format. And now you can kind of see the team start to come together, because, you know, whether or not this thing has Tailwind or Dragon Dance, either way, a Redirector and a Fake Out mod can help you set that up, especially with Gholdengo over here, you know, especially if it does have Nasty Plot. And then this last slot here, you know, you can even just go something as far as Landorus Eye, which is on the rise right now. So something like this is pretty good. Like you don't want the other one because you already have an Intimidator, okay? And now what's really cool about this is that the Water Ogerpon kind of supports Landorus and the Arcanine. You know, even if this was the other one, like Ogerpon does support it relatively well, because you can redirect a lot of the incoming water attacks from something like, you know, an Urshifu, a Milotic, another Ogerpon, you know, for that sense. So that's pretty good, right? And now you have another strong special attack on the team, you know, besides Gholdengo, right? And this functions relatively well, okay? So you can definitely go with something like this. But either way, the starting core of Moon, Gholdengo, Arcanine was your starting point. Then you just round it out with like an Intimidator, a Fake Outer, and like some other strong special attacker. Okay, you can take it in a different direction, right? But still have the same core. You could do something like this, where you could have something like Rillaboom and Urshifu, right? And again, I'm still achieving my Fire, Water, Grass core here. And I have a Fake Out Mon in Rillaboom as opposed to Iron Hands. And now you could just add something like a Redirector, right? Because I could add Amoongus, but I don't really want to double up on my grass types. So what ends up happening here is people start going for this, the Clefairy, right? Because Clefairy has Friend Guard, it has Follow Me. So now the entire team is like, I wouldn't say the entire team, but now you have Friend Guard to make its partner Pokemon relatively bulky. And now, like I said, you have this Dragon Fairy Steel core along with this Fire, Water, Grass. So you're able to set up either Tailwind / Dragon Dances or Nasty Plots, and then have everything hide next to the Clefairy, redirect everything, and then just keep clicking, you know, just certain moves here, right? And Moon Clefairy is pretty good in general because, again, Roaring Moon weak to Fairy type attacks, weak to Fighting type attacks. A Fairy Redirector is going to help that a lot, you know, because you get to redirect the not very effective fighting attacks into it, right? So you can definitely go with something like this as another idea, okay? Or you can go back to the Iron Hands concept, right? You know, back to this bulky Fake Outer that still does a ton of damage. And then you can go with the Amoongus in this sense, right? Amoongus, Gholdengo, and Iron Hands have been one of the best trios, you know, since Reg C. And then from there, you could just have something as simple as another water type. You could have something like the Urshifu, right? So this also makes sense. You can definitely do something like this, okay? Right? And again, you have another good pairing like with Fake Out Surging Strikes partner. Like Fake Out Surging Strikes is really, really good. But then you can even take another direction and say, you know what? I have, you know, Arcanine and Iron Hands and Roaring Moon. These are both weak to Intimidate. So I kind of want an anti-intimidator. I can even go something like Milotic here, right? So you can even experiment with this. And now all of a sudden you can kind of deter some of those intimidators against you. So, you know, that also works as well. Or you can even say like, okay, you know what? I want to kind of still keep this idea of Rillaboom and Urshifu, right? But instead of Clefairy, all right, I want another kind of fairy. And I kind of want to give myself screens. So you can even have this Ninetales idea. So Ninetales will have Aurora Veil. And now you make the entire team bulky, right? This is what I meant to say with the Clefairy. All right, so you have Aurora Veil, so you hide behind screens. That's going to help into a lot of Trick Room games. You have Rillaboom here to change terrain. That's going to be good into Psyspam stuff. And then now you can help set up the Gholdengo with screens, Intimidate, Fake Out Pressure. Lots of different ways to set up this Gholdengo and even this Roaring Moon if it does have Dragon Dance Lance Tailwind, right? So you kind of see how we were going about it. But like, you know, the Roaring Moon, Gholdengo, Arcanine, I always like this core. So anytime I see, you know, this is like one of the first things I look at, like, what are your supporting pieces, right? And, you know, I kind of showed you them, but in the essence, it's all about, you know, your VGC condiments, as I like to say. You have that Fake Outer, you have that Intimidator, which we have here, that Redirector, could be Ogerpon, could be Amoongus, okay, could be Clefairy, all right? And then just round out that Fire, Water, Grass core, depending on how you like to see fit. But this is one of your good starting cores. All right, next kind of core I want to show you is the hyper offensive one, and that revolves around Sunny Day Tornadus, specifically with Fluttermane and Chi-Yu. Why specifically these two? Because again, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, you already know what they can do as a duo, right? Because, you know, your Beads of Ruin, you're dropping special defenses, and now both of these are going to be hitting relatively hard. Now what you can do is use Sunny Day, and now all of a sudden the Chi-Yu is going to hit even harder with its fire type attacks, right? With Heat Wave and or Overheat. So that's going to be good. And then you get to enable photosynthesis. And if this is a modest natured Fluttermane, and now all of a sudden, if this even had like a Choice Specs, for example, the Fluttermane is going to just, you know, rip face. Okay, so now the question is, how do you support this core? Well, you have a Fluttermane and a Chi-Yu that are both relatively weak physically. So again, you're going to need like some Intimidators. So I can't think of a better Intimidator than something like a Landorus, right? So now double Genie idea, okay? And then from here, like you got a fire type and another Landorus, right? And that just screams the Ogerpon somewhat, right? You get to redirect those water type attacks. And now all of a sudden you have this Fire, Water, Grass core yet again with Chi-Yu and then the Ogerpon Wellspring. And now all I need is like some Fake Out Bond. Like I can even put here like Iron Hands, you know, for example, just to like give me something into Trick Room games. Or I can just say, you know what? let me get terrain control along with my Fake Out, and now I can also put in Rillaboom, and now these can become the Grassy Glide Boys, for example, right? But either way, you still start with this strong offensive core with like Landorus, Flutter Mane, Chi-Yu, and Tornadus, like a bunch of strong special attackers, right? And then you just round it out with like physical attackers that can give you support. So a physical Intimidate Pokemon like Landorus, a physical Fake Out Pokemon like Rillaboom, okay? And then you have a physical Redirector Pokemon like Ogerpon, right? It all just makes sense, okay? So this is, again, one way of supporting that strong core. And then if you want, you can take a different direction and say, you know what? I don't need the Ogerpon necessarily. I can even just go with something like this, where I still keep Landorus, right, for the Intimidate support, but now I can have Iron Hands for my Fake Out Mon instead of Rillaboom, and then I can have another strong water type attacker like Urshifu, right? So you could definitely do something like this. This also works well, or, you know, if anything, you can just say, I still like Rillaboom here, right? And then just do this, right? So Rillaboom, and then Urshifu, and then Chi-Yu. Here's your Fire, Water, Grass core. Strong Fake Out Pokemon along with Surging Strikes, but again, like very familiar supporting pieces, but can still do relatively well along with this trio of Flutter Mane, Chi-Yu, Tornadus. You're just aiming to do a bunch of damage, right? You have weather control with Sunny Day, so you can change Ninetales weathers, you can change Sunny Day against the opponents, right? And, you know, Sunny Day, you know, Heatran can do relatively well against the trio. This is why you have Landorus and Urshifu here. So you have that going for you in the grand scheme of things, but I do think Landorus has to come on squads like this. And then from there, your last two pieces are like your flex slots. You can do like the Ogerpon idea. You could do the Iron Hands idea. You can do, you know, Rillaboom Ursh like we have here. You know, it just all depends on how you want to play the last couple of slots. But I do think this is, you know, one of those strong cores that you can start with in terms of like Tailwind offense. All right, next I want to take a look at the common Psyspam cores. So NDD Armrouge, of course, are like the first things you put in your builder, and then from there I do like these two coming in, right? Torkoal and Ursaluna. I think these four define a core for Psyspam, right? Because again, you have a couple Trick Room setters with NDD Armrouge, right? This is your special sweeper in Trick Room, and then this also is another special sweeper in Trick Room, Eruption, right? Eruption Torkoal with Drought, because again, Drought makes your fire attacks do even more damage. Like this is your Psyspam stuff with Expanding Force. They've dropped the armor cannon, right? So you kind of need the Torkoal to put on pressure with Eruption. And then things that can wall Armrouge and Torkoal, stuff like Heatran with you know, the Flash Fire ability. That's where like the Ursaluna comes into play, because then you can just pressure the Heatran with ground type attacks. Okay, now the question is like, where do you go from here? How do I make this core even more stronger, right? So sometimes you want to ask yourself, like, is this fully committed to only Trick Room? Can there be a fast mode to the team, right? And there can be. This is where the Hisuian Lilligant comes into play, right? Because of Chlorophyll. So, you know, you double your speed, and now all of a sudden the Lilligant is the fastest thing in the format, right? And then you can just put in some filler slot here, whatever you want. That, you know, you could even just put something like Iron Hands, for example, right? You know, just something there. But Lilligant will offer the team a fast mode. Yeah, just another way of, you know, adding a flexible idea to what is otherwise a relatively hard Trick Room team. Okay, you can even do something like Gallade, right, with the Urshifu as well, right? This is what Mr. Brian Collins has been doing when I saw this back in the other couple regionals, right? So the Gallade, another Trick Room setter / Wide Guard user like the Armrouge, Psycho Cut, along with Sacred Sword, you know, with Sharpness is going to do a lot. And then the Urshifu Dark is going to also give you something into the mirror, as well as, you know, just punch these fighting types that want to deal with the the dark types, right? You get to have a fighting type attack into them, right? This is why they're both here. So you can even go this direction if you want, or you can just simply do something like, you know, add Iron Hands and then have another bulky Trick Room setter like Cresselia, for example, right? I like this is probably like my favorite kind of idea, where you just have like Torkoal, Ursaluna, Cresselia, Iron Hands. Like, I actually thought this was like a pretty good core. And then NDD Armrouge was like the back engine of it, right? So I kind of almost flipped it here, but like you could just definitely do something like this. But either way, you know, it just depends. Do you want a fast mode to your Psyspam team, or do you want to like just fully commit to the Trick Room mode? But either way, I do think you need like multiple Trick Room setters and then a couple more sweepers just besides of the NDD Armrouge Torkoal stuff. So Ursaluna was another good one to come in, you know, just for like those Heatran matchups. And then from there, you know, just re-supporting it with like another bulky fake out user like Iron Hands that's also slow, that can also do well in Trick Room. And then from there, you know, the Lilligant just gave the fast mode. Next up is a trio that we featured before on the channel, and that's this Ninetales screens idea with some Intimidate Pokemon like Landorus, and then something to support both of them with like Heatran, for example. So with Ninetales plus some Heatran, like I've seen a lot of these, right? Because again, with Ninetales able to go for Aurora Veil, is really strong. You're able to just make your entire team bulky, and then with Ninetales being weak to steel types and fire types in general, Heatran just made sense to come onto a team like this to be able to better resist that kind of stuff and, you know, pivot in nicely. And then both of these, like especially the Ninetales, yes, you're gonna get this snow warning, right, which will help your defense a little bit, but still an Intimidate Pokemon helps. So something like Landorus is also gonna be really good. And then from there, it's just all about like, okay, I've got the Intimidate support, I've got the screens, now I need some of the better heavy hitters, right? And I also need something to support the Heatran and Landorus. So you can even start with something like this, the Water Ogerpon yet again, and then you can make your snow mode even stronger by just going with something like Baxcalibur, okay? So now you have a snow mode with Baxcalibur Ninetales, and now you have this Fire, Water, Grass core with the Heatran, the Ogerpon, you have your Intimidate Pokemon with Landorus, and then just add a fake out Pokemon. Very simple. You have a couple options. You got Rillaboom over here, right? Which again can give you grassy terrain recovery. You could do something like that, or you can even just swap this out and just put in Iron Hands, and boom, oh, that's bundle. Then the team is done. That's it, right? So again, it's just all about, you know, revolving around this Ninetales idea. But you know, you don't have to give it a snow core, right? This is the easy way to do it, right? If you want to get a little bit more creative, right, you can even just do something that we were doing before and just have something like Moltres, which also generally enjoys screens, and then have something like Sinistcha, you know, where Sinistcha Moltres screens has been a thing along with Intimidate support, where the Moltres now can safely set up nasty plots and, you know, double dip into its Berserk. This is our rental, by the way, so you can even just go with this kind of concept in terms of that. But I do think, you know, this Ninetales Heatran Landorus idea is also very strong. Now, can you change the Intimidate option and still keep your fire typing with something like Ninetales and the Hisuian-Arcanine? I believe you can. So you can even just do something like this, right? And then you could have another good strong set of Pokemon like Gholdengo, and then at that point, now you got Roaring Moon instead of Baxcalibur, and now you have a Roaring Moon screens team, okay? And then from there, like I said, where else can I go in terms of my support? I've got Arcanine here, I've got Gholdengo, like I got a fire type, I got a steel type. Here's my fairy type. So here's my Dragon Fairy Steel core. All right, here's my fire type. Where's my grass and water type? Well, I can even just do something like this with Ogerpon again, right? And then some other fake out mon like Rillaboom or Iron Hands. I could definitely do that. Or I can do Rillaboom or Urshifu, right? But either way, Ninetales with an Intimidate Pokemon with the steel type is also going to be really good. So I always think you start with something like this, right? And then from there, it's just, you know, strengthening your mode. Where is it? Okay, next up, we're going to take a look at Weezing teams. So basically, how would you, you know, use a Weezing core? And the whole idea revolves around Pokemon that don't really care about neutralizing gas, okay? So obviously, the two Pokemon that come to mind is, you know, Roaring Moon and Flutter because Protosynthesis doesn't care, right? And this was often a lot of starting cores with Weezing teams, you know, back in the first regionals, you know, with Alex Underhill and so on. But then from there, who else wants to come? How about Iron Hands? Iron Hands hasn't had an ability since day one, right? We've been using this thing, and, you know, it's one of the best Pokemons in the format, and we don't even care about its ability core type. So it's another Pokemon that does well with Weezing, you know, because it only benefits it, because now Iron Hands doesn't have to deal with other Pokemon with abilities. So you just have this very strong starting four, and then from there, it's just all about surrounding it. Look, again, we have Roaring Moon, we have Flutter both Pokemon weak physically, so I need my Intimidate option. Very easy. Let's go Landorus. Very standard, right? Landorus, Iron Hands. And then, look at this. I have like a +1 slot. Like, this could be a filler slot. The easy one is just one of the Ogerpons. Either you do like the Heart Flame one, or you can even do the Water one, right? Wellspring, you know, just, you know, the Wolf Glick variant, right? You know, just be able to support this Landorus concept. But either way, you know, the Weezing teams, it's just all about surrounding it with these three. These three, they don't care about neutralizing gas, right? And then I just picked an Intimidator like Landorus, for example, just to be able to support the Roaring Moon and the Fluttering. But you see what I'm doing, right? I'm patching up my main core's weakness for, you know, with some supporting slots. And that's kind of how you have to do it, right? And you might say, well, wait a minute, now I can't use Intimidate with Landorus, you know, with the Weezing. But here's the thing, you have this idea of Ability Shield, okay, which has worked, and that's one of our rentals. Or you just simply switch out the Weezing, okay, and then the Landorus can get to activate its ability. Its Intimidate. So you have that idea going for you. All right, next up, we're gonna go with Old Reliable. We got Dragonite and Chien-Pao. Now, there's really only one, maybe two ideas right now with Dragonite, Chien-Pao that have had like pretty good success. But ultimately, of course, this is like the E-Speed shenanigans. You're gonna have Choice Band on the Dragonite, you know, and then from there, you're gonna have stuff like Outrage, right, and 2 filler slots. And then over here, Chien-Pao, it's gonna have a Focus Sash, of course, for a little bit more longevity. You're gonna have Icicle Crash, or Ice Spinner for that matter, Sucker Punch, right, Protect, okay, and then another filler slot here. Usually this is more commonly Sacred Sword right now. So now what do these two like to do? They like to click priority moves and then just deal a bunch of damage. So whether or not you have Tailwind or Trick Room, it does not matter. So this way they have like very strong hard-hitting moves. And then from here, where do you go? So things like Flutter Mane and Gholdengo can pose a problem, right? Because you can't E-Speed a Ghost type, right? So then you need something for something like a Gholdengo, right? So Heatran can definitely come, of course, all right, just to put pressure on that. And then what if it like goes Terra Dragon? Then what do you do? Well, maybe if I had my own Fairy type, that can also help as well, right? So you can even have something like Farigiraf, right? Now you might say, wait a minute, that's not a Fairy type, but it can go Terra Fairy, okay? And then at the same time, Dazzling Gleam is going to do a bunch of damage. And, you know, you get to deny other priority moves into your own Pokemon, which I think is always relatively nice in the grand scheme of things, right? So for there, you know, where do you want to go from there? Like, just simply, like, what else can I stack with Chien-Pao that can hit really hard, you know, besides Dragonite? Simply like this, Urshifu, right? And Rillaboom, right? More priority Pokemon, more physical attackers that Chien-Pao can support relatively well besides just Dragonite. So you have Dragonite, Chien-Pao, Urshifu, and then Rillaboom. So you have a Fake Outer plus Surging Strikes, okay? And then you have a Fire, Water, Grass core with Rillaboom, Urshifu, and Heatran. And then Farigiraf is just denying, you know, other priority moves altogether. And then it also has a Prison Trick Room. So this way, you know, Trick Room teams can't really do anything to you in that sense. You get to stop them from setting up. And, you know, if you just stop Trick Room engines, you know, they have a hard time of setting up and being able to do damage against you, right? So you can definitely do something like this. You could even just do like 2-2-2 Dondozo format and do Dondozo, Tatsugiri, Chi-Yu, Flutter Mane kind of idea. You know, this is the lesser popular way to do it, but it is, again, another way of considering it, right? So here we go, Flutter, Chi-Yu, and then Dondozo, and then Tatsugiri, right? Of course, the infamous 2-2-2 Dozo kind of idea, which we'll of course talk a little bit about when we get to it. But I just feel like right now Chien-Pao and Dragonite, D-Pao Knight as they commonly call it, is in a bit of an interesting spot, right? But I do think that core with Heatran and Farigiraf is the main way to go with it at the given moment. Dusclops, Bloodmoon-Ursaluna, right? So not this physical one, now we have the special one. So Dusclops has a couple things going for it, you know, with Bloodmoon-Ursaluna. You could either go the Life Orb variant and just support this thing with something like Pain Split, for example, right? And then just deal consistent chip damage with Nightshade, and then with Trick Room, of course, and then Will-O-Wisp, right? Just to neuter a lot of those physical attackers that's running around in the format. And then Blood Moon is just going for stuff like Blood Moon, and then Earth Power, okay, Protect in this last slot, and then something like Hyper Voice, right? So this is one way to consider it. And then how do you make this do even more damage? This is where they start stacking stuff like Chi-Yu, right? Chi-Yu, there we go. So this is your core. Dusclops, Bloodmoon-Ursaluna, Chi-Moon, as I like to call it, Chi-Moon. And then how do you support this? Well, you already got like two very strong special attackers. You are going to need some support, okay? Dusclops has the Trick Room here, but like, how do I support, you know, these two so this way they can stick around for a little bit longer? Well, first of all, I do want my Water Ogerpon here, okay? So I get a Fire, Water, Grass core. I get another Redirector in the Ogerpon, okay? I would like Intimidate. Landorus sounds interesting, you know, double ground type, but again, Intimidate support for this R-type just also makes sense. And then some other fake out Pokemon, like you could do very simply like Iron Hands here. And this is the standard Bloodmoon-Ursaluna team that's going around. But again, you can still take this a different direction, right? You know, with Chi-Yu over here. But again, this is like one of your starting cores. And you see how we supported yet again with like a very, very similar formula. Because what you're able to do is just make Ursaluna just do even more damage, right? Because the Chi-Yu is just boosting it with Beads of Ruin, right? Now you might say like, wait a minute, the Chi-Yu is not a Trick Room Pokemon, right? It's not gonna outspeed things. So the way you would do it is just make it super bulky and then just have like very, very minimal speed. And then what you can do is just swap in the Chi-Yu on the turn that the Ursaluna is going for like these hard-hitting Blood Moons or these hard-hitting Hyper Voices and Earth Powers, right? And then bring the Dusclops back in later when the Chi-Yu has already done its job. Or you can re-pivot out. Like for example, like if you think Urshifu is going for like a close combat here, then you can just swap it out and go back into your Ghost type, right? So there's some good synergy here with the Dusclops and the Chi-Yu. All right, how about some Rain, right? So for Rain, it's a very interesting spot for Rain. So I always, the same Rain core is still relevant even in Regulation E as it was in Regulation C. And the Rain core that I'm talking about is this. You have Pelipper, you have Iron Hands, you have Amoongus, and you have Gholdengo. This is Rain Core 101 since well, not day one, but since Reg C, Reg B even, no, right, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But either way, you have a Rain setter with Pelipper, you have Amoongus and Gholdengo that do well in the Rain. Why? Because you have a Grass type in the Rain that generally enjoys it because you get to have reduced fire damage. Same thing with the Steel type like Gholdengo, able to calmly sit in the Rain in front of a Fire type. All right, and this is where Dragon Terra is also relatively helpful. Okay, sometimes you might even see King Gambit in this slot, but this is your typical Rain core. You always start here, right? And then from there, your last two slots are your flex slots, right? So pick a Rain Sweeper, you know, put it in slot number 5, and then maybe get like another fire type in here, right? So for example, you could have the latest version of Salamence, right? Salamence Rain was an idea, right? If you don't want that, you could even have like Urshifu, Rapid Strike. This can also do well in Rain. Or you can even go as far back as Regulation early Reg D and do something like Basculegion, right? So Basculegion becomes your Rain Sweeper. And then from there, you have like maybe some Intimidate Pokemon, right? Then something like Salamence can even come back here and do relatively well. Or even a Fire type like Hisuian-Arcanine can also come here. Now, why would you put a Fire type on a Rain team? Well, the thing is, Rain teams, you know, typically feature water types that are weak to grass types, and generally you wanted your fire type to be able to counter those grass types. So it was the same thing when you had Kyogre and Incineroar. Like, why would you put Incineroar on a Kyogre team? Because Kyogre struggles against something like a Rillaboom, and Incineroar was a great way to mitigate that Grassy Glide damage against the Kyogre in that sense, right? So you could definitely do something like that. Either way, you always start with Pelipper, Iron Hands, Amoongus, Gholdengo, and then from there, you pick a Rain Sweeper and then add your flex slot. Galarian Moltres. So right now, I think the best way to really use Moltres is just have a screen setter with Intimidate support, okay? And then from there, like, can you get it to recover over time, you know, besides having the Citrus Berry here? So if you're gonna go screens, either way, you either go with something like Grimmsnarl, or you go with something like the Alolan-Ninetales, which is what we've done in the past, right? Either way, screens is coming, okay? Then from there, I think Sinistcha also comes, right? So this could be either Moltres Grimmsnarl Sinistcha or Moltres Ninetales Sinistcha, and this is your core, okay? Then from here, give me a Fake Out and give me an Intimidate Pokemon. So you can give me something like Iron Hands, okay? And then you could either do something like Landorus, which is what we've done, or you can do something like the Hisuian-Arcanine, right? And again, it's just all about like choosing your Intimidate pieces. But from here, I think this is relatively good. Now, again, if you don't want the Ninetales, you can always just swap in something like Grimmsnarl. So this way you don't have to worry about weather changing on you. And then you can't even click your screens after that. But either way, this is the way to go about it in terms of like choosing a core for Galarian Moltres, right? So screen support with Hospitality Recovery, Intimidate, and Fake Out Pokemon. And then your last one is like your little flex slot in terms of something else that can support the Moltres. But either way, screens, Sinistcha, right? And then Fake Out Pokemon with Arcanine. That's one way to really utilize this. And, you know, it's just all about making Moltres bulky as well as some of these options, right? Because you have Light Screen and Reflect, then you could either have something like Parting Shot just to keep weakening things, and then the Moltres is able to set up its nasty plots, for example. And then at the same time, Iron Hands and Arcanine can also enjoy the screen support with like Light Screen and Reflect, by the way. Here we go. They can stick around on the field a little bit longer, and if this thing is going for like hard-hitting Flare Blitzes, all the more reason to have Sinistcha on the team to be able to support the Arcanine. I think it goes relatively well. You can even just have like a simple water type here, like even something as simple as like Urshifu for that matter. That can work, or another kind of water type here. Either way, you know, fire, water, grass, core, right? But it's still like pretty good. But I always start with something like this. This is the 5 you want, and if you want the other kind of 5, you can just go with Ninetales here on this slot, and then instead of Arcanine, you know, you can even keep the Arcanine, or you could just do like Landorus over here. And then this is like our way of going about it, right? So, you know, just definitely consider it. I do think it is a working formula for Moltres right now. Okay, back to hyper offense here. So let's go back to Regidrago here. So basically with Regidrago, again, you put on a ton of pressure with Dragon Energy. And the only way you're gonna really be able to put pressure is if you go first and be able to click it. And one way to really do that is just to add Tornadus and go with this Tailwind idea, you know, with Dragon Energy. Now, what's the one thing that can resist Dragon type attacks, or actually not even resist, just take no damage, is the Fairy type. So Fairies can pose a problem for Regidrago, which is kind of why you have this Terra Steel idea. So this way you don't just go splat to Fairy type attacks. But then again, how can I re-put the pressure on there? It used to be so you could put Flash Cannon on this thing. Not even Flash Cannon, Terra Blast, Terra Steel. But, you know, then the Heatran kind of walls you, which is why they started adding Earth Power. So now I needed the steel damage to come from somewhere else. And now enter Gholdengo here, which is something else that enjoys the Tailwind support and that also would love to click Make It Rain under Tailwind, right? So now all of a sudden Dragon Energy / Make It Rain become very hard to switch into, because, you know, you can't resist both technically, right? And then from here, you know, steel type damage. Again, this is why you have ground type attacks. You know, Heatran can, you know, do a number against both of these. But again, if you have Earth Power here and then something else that can also put the pressure on Heatran, something like Urshifu, for example, then you're kind of chilling. And then Urshifu also is something that enjoys Tornadus, because now you have this idea of Rain Dance. Okay, so now all of a sudden Gholdengo starts taking less damage against fire types, and now the Urshifu does even more damage because you have Rain Dance. So what's the other thing that can really hinder Regidrago and something like Gholdengo is a priority move. Something like Sucker Punch or something like, you know, Grassy Glide, even though it's resisted, will make Dragon Energy do less damage. This is why something like Farigiraf comes onto teams like this. So this way you can have Armor Tail to stop priority altogether. And now there's no way to get priority against Regidrago and Gholdengo because you have the Farigiraf on, switch in, ready to go. And now from here, you know, again, I have Urshifu here. What's another really common partner? Just slap on the Rillaboom here, and now you have this really strong hyper offensive team. But again, it all started with Regidrago, Tornadus, and Gholdengo, and then it's just all about using your support pieces that can really help this idea flourish, because again, what stops it is priority, okay, and fairy types, which is why we slapped on the Gholdengo here to make it difficult. And again, priority, you know, you get to deny that with the Farigiraf. One of my favorite defensive cores in competitive Pokemon is this, you know, with Amoongus, Gholdengo, and Iron Hands, because again, you're just able to set up nasty plot with the redirection support from the Amoongus. You have, where's that, Rage Powder here, and then, you know, Spore is just so good, right? I understand Ogerpon can be immune to it, but, you know, besides that, Amoongus is still good. And then in Trick Room, it gives you an answer to be able to play into it, because you have Amoongus and Iron Hands, two Pokemon that are relatively slow, so they can do that. And then again, Gholdengo with Terra Dragon can just easily set up this nasty plot and start putting a ton of pressure on sleeping Pokemon, or even just like fake out nasty plot and then just start going from there. And then just adding an Intimidate Pokemon like Landorus, okay, or even something like Arcanine can be good. But I don't like Arcanine necessarily, something like this, because now I have 3 ground weaknesses, and I understand I have a ground resist and, you know, there's Terastallization. I just think a flying type, you know, just to make the opponent think twice about clicking a ground move into something like this, you know, so that way it gets whiffed. And this is already like a very good starting for, right? You know, a defensive backbone to a team. And now you just, you know, pick 2 Pokemon that can define an archetype, okay? But I usually just start with this, Okay, and then, you know, what can really utilize this? Like, I like Moltres here, right? For example, because Moltres, again, something that's doesn't have as good physical defense as opposed to special defense, right? So Landorus is going to be great here, and then, you know, electric attacks can put something onto the Moltres, so this way that gets whiffed, and then fake out, set up nasty plot here. You know, you don't even need the Gholdengo necessarily, right? But again, even Roaring Moon works. Roaring Moon works on something like this, and then, you know, some other fire type that can really put pressure on the opponent in terms of like grass type damage. Like, you know, there's lots of different ways to, you know, define an archetype with these last two flex slots, but I do like this defensive backbone, you know, with Iron Hands, Amoongus, and Gholdengo. Alright, last but not least, let's talk about Dondozo here. So, you know, I do love Glimmora here on Dondozo teams. I think if I had to, you know, use Dondozo, this is the first thing I would slap on here, just because it's such a great lead, and, you know, poison chip damage just weakens everything so that Dondozo can just clean up in the end game. And there's two ways to go from here. Either you go, you know, the hyper aggressive way with Tornadus, or you go the bulkier way with Ninetales screens, right? So, you know, if you do the Ninetales, you know, here's your core, right? And if you do Tornadus, then this is your core, right? Now, where do you go from here? So, in my opinion, you can just do something like Urshifu, the dark one, and then you can just do something like Flutter main, you know, just to wrap it up here. So, like, this is a very, very strong hyper offensive mode, right? And if you don't want to do this, you could, again, do the defensive one, which is what our rental was. You could do something like Ogerpon here with the Heart Flame, along with Ninetales screens. Not that Ninetales, the other Ninetales. All right, the Aurora Veil, which and again, we did a video on this a while ago, but this is where I would start here. And then you just slap on something like Iron Hands, you know, fake out pressure, you know, be able to set up your screen, set up your Swords Dance as well. You know, something that's like super, super aggressive. And then also start setting on, you know, fake out Toxic Spike stuff, you know, with the Glimmora. You can even... I don't want to say that, no, because like you can even proc your own Toxic Spikes by just attacking him, but you know, for what reason do you have to do that? But either way, I still think the starting core is like this, right? Dondozo, Glimmora, right? This has been a thing, you know, since even Reg C, even before that. I do like Glimmora on these teams, and I think if you had to use a Dondozo team, you should start with these three, you know, very, very strong. It just all depends on direction you want to take it. Either you go like Tailwind offense mode, or you go bulky screens mode, and you know, you don't have to use the same you know, supporting pieces that I showed you with those two builds. There's other ways of going about it, but either way, you know, from here it's always going to be starting with Tornadus, or you're going to go the Ninetales route, and then your last two slots are your flex slots. All right, folks, so that's going to do it for now. I just wanted to introduce, you know, some of the more popular cores that we've been able to build on the channel. And again, if this is something that you're interested in, feel free to sign up for coaching, you know, with team building sessions available with that tier 3 sub. If you look in the video description below, you can see that there is a link to join the channel with the tier 3 sub. From there, you get to message me on Discord. You can join the Discord, and then we get to hash things out on a Discord call, build a team from scratch from the EVs ground up, and then get you that team that you need to be able to compete at the regional level. Or if you have a premier challenge coming up, or a mid-season challenge coming up, we can get you ready for that as well. But other than that, you know, in the comment section, it's the same thing. There's another link to join with that tier 3 sub. But either way, just join the Discord. You can bounce ideas off with me, or you can bounce ideas off with some of my members of my community. But if you want that team building session with me, definitely sign up with that tier 3 sub. It's well worth it. You know, we've been able to get people a lot of results with CP, you know, with some of these tournaments that they've been going to. So we look to do the same, you know, as we wrap up 2023. You know, DLC's coming up. But hopefully you enjoyed our video, you know, introducing some of these main cores, and hopefully it helped you out a little bit in terms of putting things in perspective as to what's strong, why it's strong, and how we support teams with the rest of the pieces after we've decided on the core. All right, so without further ado, we'll be back with another video in the next one, guys. Peace out, and have a good one.